Okay, hello. In the interest of time, because I know we have a number of things to discuss today and a lot of great people to listen to, I want to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome. I am Caitlin Margaret Kelly, the curator of the Archive of Documentary Arts here at the Rubenstein Rare Book and Manuscript Library. And with my colleagues, Patrick Stosky, curator of the Human Rights Archive, and Lou Brown, senior research scholar and director of programs for the Forum for Scholars and Publics, we welcome you to this webinar with Rory Owen Delaney and Andrew Fuller, hosts of the podcast Leonard, Political Prisoner, led by Duke's Courtney Lewis, and with special guest attorney and activist Chase Iron Eyes. I have a couple of housekeeping details first. Unauthorized recording and rebroadcasting of this webinar is not permitted. We are, however, recording it and we'll make it available on our website for a period of time after, in case you want to come back and revisit it, or you have people who didn't get to show up today. If we are to have technical difficulties that we cannot solve in the moment, I may choose to end the webinar, continue the discussion with our panelists today, and then post that at a later time. We ask for your patience if we do encounter problems today. In this webinar format, questions and comments may be entered in the Q&A or comment section on your screen. We welcome anyone to ask questions throughout the discussion, but due to our limited time, we may not be able to answer all your questions today. And hopefully this won't happen, but we also reserve the right to remove anyone from the webinar if we deem that necessary. The webinar will be grounded by 3 listening sections, followed by a discussion of each section. We ask your patience as we spool up the audio for each of our sessions, and we encourage you to listen to the whole podcast at some point, which is free on several platforms. Before I get to introductions, I wanted to acknowledge the myriad of places we might be coming from and where you might be joining us from today. I am at Duke University, located in Durham, North Carolina. In lieu of a land acknowledgement, I'd like to recognize the activism of undergraduate and graduate students here on campus in support of Native American students. The Native American Indigenous Student Alliance has been advocating for changes for years. And while progress has been made in some areas, we're very thrilled to have Professor Lewis with us, more is needed, including more faculty hires, better support for Native American students, and progress towards a minor and major in Native American studies, among other demands. So I would encourage you, if you're here on Duke's campus, to get to know some of those advocates and stories. This brings me to why we're gathered here today with these 4 amazing discussants. The podcast Leonard, Political Prisoner was the 2021 inaugural winner of the Human Rights Audio Documentary Award at the Rubenstein Library. This award seeks to support outstanding documentary artists, exploring human rights and social justice, and expand the audio holdings in the archive for long-term preservation and access. We look forward to offering this award again and would encourage any makers here in our audience today to consider submitting work in the future. This award is open to a range of audio documentary from traditional to experimental. So before I hand it over to Courtney Lewis, I would like to introduce everyone. First up is Rory Owen Delaney. He is a producer, writer, and podcaster who got his start in Hollywood. He also co-wrote Lionsgate feature film, Breaking Brooklyn. His first documentary, Toxic Soup, was distributed internationally by French Connection Films. Leonard, Political Prisoner is his first podcast. In 2022, Leonard was named one of the top true crime series of the year by editors at Apple Podcasts. Currently, Delaney is adapting the award-winning podcast into a documentary called Land of the Free with Chase Iron Eyes and Andrew Fuller. Delaney holds a BA in English from Yale University and an MFA in dramatic writing from New York University. Andrew Fuller began his producing career in script development at Village Roadshow Pictures after earning a degree in political science from Colgate University. He produced the documentary feature Orange Sunshine, which premiered at South by Southwest, where it was nominated for the Grand Jury Award for Best Documentary and was ultimately sold to Amazon Studios. It also won the Audience Award for Best Documentary at the Newport Beach Film Festival and San Francisco Doc Fest. He currently serves as producer co-host of the award-winning podcast series Leonard, Political Prisoner. Chase Ironeyes is a Native American activist, attorney, and enrolled member of the Oglala, Lakota, and Standing Rock Sioux tribes. He is co-director and lead counsel of the Lakota People's Law Project, as well as co-founder of the Native American news website, Last Real Indians. He was on the front lines of the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline and faced a possible 10 years in federal prison for documenting the protests. He is a producer and host of the podcast Cut to the Chase. Ironeyes has appeared on CNN's United Shades of America, as well as Vice News. He holds degrees in political science and American Indian Studies from the University of North Dakota, and a Juris Doctor of Law degree with an emphasis in federal Indian law from the University of Denver's Sturm College of Law. And finally, we are joined by Courtney Lewis, Associate Professor of Cultural Anthropology, and the first federally recognized American Indian faculty member here at Duke. She is an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Her research explores the themes of Native sovereignty, economic justice, and the ethnography of American Indian businesses. Lewis shows how Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian business owners contend with factors general to capitalist America and specific to the American Indian experience to make their way forward. Her prize-winning book, Sovereign Entrepreneurs, Cherokee Small Business Owners and the Making of Economic Sovereignty, published by UNC Press, is driven by a powerful sense of ethical as well as scholarly engagement with issues of social justice and Native sovereignty, insofar as developing individual and tribal businesses is a key aspect of 21st century American Indian life. She received her PhD from UNC Chapel Hill and is currently here with us at Duke University. So thank you for your patience as I went through all of that, and I would love to turn it over to Professor Lewis. Thank you.
Widow, thank you, Caitlin, for that great introduction. And also thank you and Patrick and Lou for all of your work on bringing this issue to the public. Osio Nagadu, Dr. Courtney Lewis, Agwadoa, Jijalagi, Kalieli Gaji Jijoa. So I'm very happy to have you all in the audience joining us here today. Let's begin today by launching directly into our first clip that is going to introduce us to the podcast and Leonard Peltier.
On June 26, 1975, on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, 2 FBI agents, Jack Kohler and Ronald Williams, were shot to death virtually at point-blank range with rifles. Yeah. Did you kill them?
This is a clip from a 1991 60 Minutes segment. The voice you just heard is Steve Croft. And this is Leonard Peltier.
No, I did not. No.
You didn't pull the trigger?
No, I never killed those agents.
Did you fire at those agents?
Yes, I fired at them.
Why?
Because they were firing at me, and I fired back.
Are you guilty of anything?
The only thing I'm guilty of is trying to help my people.
On June 26, 1975, 2 plainclothes FBI agents assigned to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, Jack Kohler and Ronald Williams, were tailing a red pickup on Highway 18. When the truck pulled off the road and onto Calvin and Cecilia Jumping Bull's ranch, Kohler and Williams followed. What happened next is a matter of intense dispute. Either the passengers in the lead vehicle jumped out brandishing rifles and began firing at the agents, or the agents shot first.
But by noon, Kohler and Williams were dead. So was an Indian by the name of Joe Stuntz, and nearly 50 years later, with heart trouble and early-stage lung cancer, Leonard Peltier sits in the Coleman Federal Penitentiary, serving out the first of 2 consecutive life terms for his presence at the shootout. You're listening to Leonard, a new podcast series about Leonard Peltier, the longest-serving political prisoner in American history. I'm Rory Owen Delaney.
And I'm Andrew Fuller. We've spent the last year working to share Leonard's story with a new generation of people. Who he is, how he ended up behind bars, and why we believe he deserves to go free.
February 6th, 2023 marks Leonard Peltier's 48th year of being held in a maximum security prison. He is now 78 years old. I would also like to extend a welcome to Chase Iron Eyes, Rory Owen Delaney, and Andrew Fuller. Can you all give our audience just a brief update on where things stand for Peltier today?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Leonard is 78 years old. Unfortunately, he is in poor health. His health has been deteriorating over the years, partially due to not being treated properly for pretty much the entire extent of his incarceration. But, Leonard is a fighter, as you can only imagine, as someone who's been in jail that long. And he's an incredibly talented painter as well. We were thrilled to find out he recently got his paints back after not having them for quite a while due to the COVID restrictions. But overall, we're in close contact with his attorney, Kevin Sharp, and who recently saw Leonard. And, he's optimistic that President Biden will finally be the one to set him free.
Thank you for that. And I know that he's also petitioned for different structural changes, parole, a lowered prisoner classification status that would enable him to be closer to his family. Has there been any progress on those fronts while we wait to hear back?
It's tough to say. I know that he does have a clemency petition that at least 7 senators have signed. So Senator Schatz, Senator Sanders, Senator Hirono, quite a few. So, and also additional members of Congress have signed on to that. So I know that that is before President Biden, I believe, and he could act on it whenever. So hopefully sooner rather than later. And I know that they're also trying to get him, because he's in a maximum security federal prison in Florida, Coleman Federal Penitentiary. And he's obviously 78 and he's not really a flight risk. He's got arthritis and so on and so forth, and he's not in the greatest shape. So yes, one of the other things they've been trying to do is get him at least, sent to a less, to a more comfortable setting for someone of his age. So I know that they're trying to do that. I don't know how much progress they've made. I know that the Bureau of Prisons may not have their full staff, for some of these considerations, but I'll defer to Chase as well if he has any thoughts.
Thank you for that, guys. I will say that I was inside to visit Leonard inside Coleman Prison, which is a USP, which is a max. It's not the super max, but for an elder of ours who is in failing health, he certainly doesn't need to be in a USP, in United States prison, a maximum security unit. He somehow is able to remain in high spirits, in good spirits. Hope has certainly not died on Leonard Peltier, the longest serving political prisoner. Even just to recognize that he is a political prisoner dives directly into why we feel he's still incarcerated. But we're in close contact with his current attorney, a former federal judge named Kevin Sharp. He's great. He's a great guy. I'm in close contact with Gene Roach, who was also there that day, June 26, 1975, at the Jumping Bull property where my dad's cabin was located. My father was also there, including a lot of our other relatives. It was a different world here on the Pine Ridge Reservation where I currently live. But like Gene Roach, who is a board member of the International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, just told me the other day that Deb Haaland, the current Secretary of the Department of the Interior, in Biden's cabinet, gave her a phone call We don't know what prompted that call, but things happen so fast. So we certainly haven't heard that Leonard is going to receive a transfer closer to home, which is what he wants. He knows he's in the twilight years of his life, and he just wants to be close to home. He wants to be close to loved ones. He wants to be near his territory, you know, and there's a lot of reasons for that have to do with the next phase of you know, his reality, which is his transition to the spirit world. And he knows these things, and so he's pleading with us. I'm beyond grateful to everybody who put this together and who is recognizing the work that we're doing with the podcast. I mean, just hearing that little bit, it flashed me right back to when we were on the ground out here. Rory, Andrew, and I, we were at the property. So we always remain hopeful. We certainly remain hopeful, but we have not heard that there's concrete things that are happening to make that shift happen.
Thank you so much, Chase. And hopefully programs like this, work that you're all doing, can bring even more attention at this kind of critical moment to what we can do for, as you said, the longest serving political prisoner in the United States. And kind of moving on a bit, that's not an accident. So while this series in particular is focused on Leonard Pelletier, what do you all believe that his story says about American Indians' encounters with the US criminal justice system more broadly? For example, why has the FBI's attentions focused not only specifically on Native Nation reservations, but also on tribal sovereignty activism, both on and off reservations? And of course, this goes back to the nascence of the FBI on the Osage Reservation in Oklahoma during the infamous Osage murders. And as you talk about AIM's role in the Red Power movement in the 70s. So how do you see this kind of as a broader part of what's happening structurally in the US criminal justice system?
I'll
do you want to go first?
Crack at that, brothers. Yeah, let me take the first crack at that. Thank you for that, Professor Courtney Lewis. It's certainly, I read The Killers of the Flower Moon. I did not know the FBI started there in Osage territory. I was completely unaware of that, you know, before J. Edgar Hoover and all of this. But very succinctly, the Indian Wars have not ended. If you pay attention to the field of federal Indian law and the existence of the federal Indian, the existence of the federal Indian reservation, the term tribes, the federal apparatus is very, very careful to create a framework within which they can absorb the substance of indigenous sovereignty, indigenous nationhood. Even tribal nationhood would be a stretch for some federal officials throughout the years who, starting with, you know, the Marshall Trilogy, which was those old lawsuits involving the Cherokee Nation and others, the state of Georgia, a legal fiction was created to absorb the American Indian, the indigenous person. That is a 300-year process, and it involves things like blood quantum. And so indigenous people who are merely asserting our birthrights and our present consciousness oftentimes almost always are inevitably going to run afoul of what is now like the corporate extractive colonial process that takes many forms. At No Dapple, at the Stand with Standing Rock, it took the form of me just calling people to the front line to assist us, and I was charged with inciting a riot for that. Leonard Pelletier, his case, you'd have to do a deep dive into there, because there was a civil war being instigated here on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And this civil war, which the former U.S. attorney, is a great guy named Brendan Johnson, he was the U.S. attorney under President Obama, admitted that he was trying to investigate 69 deaths, a full 69 deaths that had happened on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And we haven't really begun to speak about, you know, those wounds. I will say that right now what's happening in Thacker Pass. If anybody in the audience or in the listening audience has heard of Pihimaha, I've made a trip out there to interface with other tribal leadership. Because I'm an attorney, for the past 14 years, I've kept a door open, a window open to those tribal sovereigns who are, yes, part of that apparatus that was created and recognized by the colonial government, the federal government, but they are a certain creature that has untapped potential, rights, immunities, privileges, scopes, all sorts of opportunities exist that current jurisprudence doesn't really know how to deal with it. So I'm always proximate to those elected leaders. And I went out to Thacker Pass at the invite of Chairman Melendez. One of my good friends, Chairwoman Janet Alkire, is now the chairwoman at the Standing Rock Nation. My other good friend is now the chair at the Oglala Lakota Nation, the Pine Ridge Reservation. Frank Starr comes out. He's recently called for Leonard's freedom. We're always kind of like the canary in the coal mine. And because of our cosmologies and our cultural mythology that connects us to the land and to the universe, you know, it is just incumbent upon us, inherent, that we defend clean water, sacred sites, the land itself. This is going to put us in direct juxtaposition to those forces which seek to, you know, just completely usurp any human presence or rights or connections to that land. So that is the quickest way that I can answer that. That's a big question.
It is a big question. And just to add a quick point before I let you all jump in again to your Indian Wars Have Not Ended. If people have not seen the Lakota People's Law Project report that came out several years ago, it demonstrates that Native Americans are the most likely to be killed by police as well. So we have the larger federal battles, but we also have very real battles going on the ground. So Rory and Andrew, would you like to jump in a little bit?
Sure. Well, just speaking on police brutality, I mean, it's my understanding that was one of the original reasons for the founding of the American Indian Movement, which was one of these social and racial justice organizations that were kind of born in the 60s. You said the Red Power movement. Obviously, there was the Black Power movement, which is the Black Panthers. There was Chicano Power movement. There's the Chicanos. There's the the Socialist Democrats, or the Socialists, and all these groups. The FBI was monitoring them in the 60s, and actually they had some controversial tactics that were called COINTELPRO, and the the Senate Intelligence Committee actually investigated COINTELPRO, and they were going to investigate what was happening on Pine Ridge. There was a tribal president, Dick Wilson, who was essentially the go-between between the federal government and the reservation, and he was illegally transferring valuable lands. And so he was obviously the government's guy, and AIM was opposing him. They didn't want the land to be given away. That was given to them in the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, and so this all just came to a head essentially on June 26th, and unfortunately 3 people died, 2 FBI agents and an American Indian Movement member, Joe Stunts. So yeah, it's hard to tackle that all, but it's a great question, and I don't know if Andrew wants to chime in as well. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think you guys both covered that pretty well.
But yeah, I will just say one more thing about AIM, was that the other thing they were trying to do was they were addressing police brutality, but then it sort of grew from there, and it became preservation of indigenous culture and traditions, and also treaty rights were a big focus. So, they occupied Alcatraz, they occupied Rushmore, they occupied the BIA headquarters in Washington, D.C. while Richard Nixon was running for re-election. And then obviously they also occupied Wounded Knee, which we just had the 50th anniversary of the occupation of Wounded Knee on February 27th. So it's just so much history that comes into play when you're looking at Leonard's case. And that was one of the big attractions for us as documentary filmmakers to the story.
And oftentimes these stories are deliberately hidden. So bringing these out in a variety of media is even more important. So let's move on to the next set of clips. We are going to hear in this next set from Chase Iron Eyes. The first clip will be him at the Little Family Cemetery discussing his father's activism and the violence of the US justice system against him. In the second clip, he'll discuss his own activism.
I don't come see my dad very often. June Little, Wallace June Little. He was a Wounded Knee veteran, 2 tours in Vietnam, Custer riots, Mount Rushmore. He was a quiet, reserved man of action. Hook Ichiab, they used to call him Hook, because he had 1 arm and 1 eye. He lost his arm and his eye in our struggle for liberation. My father had experience in explosives that he gained from the United States Army. We have to assume that he was preparing some implements that went beyond civil resistance to assert our international struggle, our international character, to be our own nation.
Wow. Man, you can hear that meadowlark in there. It sounds really good. I haven't listened to the whole thing. It's strange enough, but Rory and Andrew, like Dan Mariville, just pulled up outside my house while we started this, and I had to have my daughter tell him I'm busy with this. We should have just dropped him right in here. These guys would love to meet Dan Mariville.
Bring on in Dan. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. And we have one more clip, I believe.
I did 2 Facebook Live feeds, was eventually charged with inciting a riot and criminal trespass. And I argued that it was our original and inherent right to be there and our treaty right to be there. But anyhow, I didn't really deserve the credit or the blame for Last Child's Camp, but I was targeted because I was a known name. But, it caused this long struggle, and the whole cause of my legal defense was to try to expose what was really going on and who the real terrorists are. During Standing Rock, they cast me as a terrorist, indigenous, religiously driven jihadist. They characterized my daughter as that and kept tabs on her. Trained killers, mercenaries. They were present at Standing Rock too, I know. But that's just the feds. They infiltrate everything, and they own it, all the information transmission, all that stuff. So you gotta, walk carefully. You gotta walk without fear, but you gotta be like a stepping razor. You gotta be able to know the law.
So I have a couple of questions for you, Chase. But first, can you talk a little bit about how you and your father personally have reconciled or not the experience of being involved in the US military in foreign conflicts with the experience of being targeted by the US federal government inside the borders of the United States? And just for our audience's knowledge, we know that American Indians have the highest percentage of people serving of any group in the United States at 19%, as well as the highest percentage of people that have been given military awards.
That's it. My dad was very paranoid from everything that happened here in the 1970s. A lot of our people had come back from Vietnam, and they were trained very well, and they were told that they were defending freedoms. all over the world. I mean, we still tell this to our potential recruits or conscripts. And I have military in my family, not only my father, my older brother, my good friend, who they've gone to Operation Iraqi Freedom. They've gone to Desert Storm, Desert Shield. They've given and they've suffered a lot, and they know that it's not just about defending freedoms, that there's other concerns of the military industrial complex and the profit margins of some complex characters. But when what they tell me and what my father told me is that he was defending our homeland. He was defending the very earth that the country of America now says is theirs, but it's also ours because we signed treaties with these Americans. Since 1924, we've had American citizenship imposed upon us. We didn't necessarily lobby for that, but after World War I, America is this great evolving experiment, and those same freedoms and those same rights and privileges and immunities that my father and other military veterans, native military veterans, have defended all over the world, if you could give it that and look at it that way for a minute, we felt like they felt like those freedoms, rights, privileges, and immunities were under threat here during the 1970s. They certainly were. I mean, it was a war zone here. The FBI, the Department of Justice, COINTELPRO got away with a lot. And that is why I believe Leonard is still in prison, because to let him out would call into question everything that happened that day. I mean, that whole time period at Standing Rock. If you recall, more than 3,000 US military veterans came to stand with us at Standing Rock because they knew that they were standing on the right side of history. And so, and back then, back in J. Edgar Hoover's day, it was just easy to label us as the anti-Americans or the communists or however they did it. And they did it in all those ways, in all the bad ways. But after January 6, 2021, that's not so easy anymore. America is willing to talk about race, the racialized nature of these institutions, the criminal justice institutions, the institutions of government, institutions of power. When those private military contractors, and they're right there in North Carolina, they're called Tiger Swan. This was part of my defense when they were trying to send me to prison. They violated rights and surveilled and instigated a lower level conflict on American soil against American people, not just indigenous nations, indigenous people, but American people of all walks. I will say that it is too complex. It is no longer as easy as it once was for largely white or Caucasian FBI led by people like J. Edgar Hoover, who targeted all of the quote unquote others, socialist, communists, native people, African American, anybody. But it's no longer that easy anymore. So we really have to do inner work as human beings, as Americans, to try to arrive at a place where this shouldn't be happening to anyone. I mean, it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be happening to anyone, and it is. And we have to continue the fight because it is not going to get any easier. It's still going to be complex as long as Leonard Peltier's in prison. It shows that we have a lot of work to do.
I agree. And I just want to reiterate your point that for him to be released from prison would call attention not just to AIM, not just to American Indian rights today, but the government's involvement all through this. So again, not just the Black Power movement, but all the way up through Standing Rock and the violation of American citizens' rights in America that continues today at this very moment, right? So it's not only calling into question, but bringing a lot of attention to this topic. And kind of thinking about the long history of this, my second question is if you can talk a little bit about the way that the history of American Indian activism is shared across generations. And this is something I will admit is also very personal to me. My dad was also brought to Wounded Knee, and he was one of the original writers of the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is now being challenged in the Supreme Court. So could you talk a little bit about this kind of intergenerational activism?
Yes, I too was, and it's never been a majority of, you think about the indigenous experience, and our people had to make very difficult decisions under duress, under conditions that we can empathize with, or at least sympathize, but we really don't know what they went through. And so even there was a time, one of the earlier questions talked about why American Indians are always targeted, or seemingly constructively targeted by, criminal justice institutions. And it used to be illegal to be Indian. There was a thing called the Courts of Indian Offenses, where if you participated in traditional ceremonies, the sweat lodge, Sundance, giveaway ceremonies, vision quest or fasting ceremonies, any ceremonies, or you even appeared that you were doing it, you could do a year in prison for that. So there's been a long history of criminalizing indigenous peoples and criminalizing our way of life, and which informs and provides the foundation for our political or economic sovereignty. All of that had to go underground. Our ceremonies had to go underground. Those who, were related to Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, for instance, in the Lakota Nation, had to go underground. And so that was passed on through the generations, through the last 100 years. And my mom, met my father. And then before she met my father, she was working with people like Chief Frank Foolscrow, Louis Redshirt, Louis Badwound, these chiefs or headsmen that were an expression of that ancient sovereignty that had treated with the United States government a couple hundred years before these guys were alive. These are contemporaries of my mother. And so she learned some of why Native people are standing in a different position. When we talk about the Brackeen lawsuit, the Indian Child Welfare Act, one of the main thrusts of that lawsuit is to relegate Native people to American citizenship. And I don't say that pejoratively, but as Native nations, we are not only American citizens. The height of our rights are not constitutional or civil rights. They are international human rights, treaty rights, inherent rights. So what the Supreme Court is doing is very dangerous for Native people, for Native nations. And it definitely deserves looking into. But I will just end it by saying that, it's passed on from generation to generation because my father was involved in repelling those, what they saw as inhumane, in colonial intrusions into their daily lives. This is no different than anybody would do to defend themselves or their families. My mother then taught me about our land struggle for the return of the Black Hills. That's another long story. And taught me to value education, because she said that those things would help me carry on that legacy. And as an attorney, I've done my share of work in not only as an attorney, but just as a philosopher, or maybe a Lakota theologian, somebody who's constantly trying to build bridges with other demographics. I've found great success doing that. Look at Standing Rock. Standing Rock was started by Native people. By the end of it, there were more non-Native people there. I guess white people, people that identify as white. Our white brothers were outnumbering us on the front line at Standing Rock by the end of it. So I think it has a lot to do with who we are as human beings right now to this day. And indigenous sovereignty in a very powerful way is able to give a spiritual foundation to everybody who's been kind of left in this strange place by Western civilization. And Leonard is standing up against all of that, even the extraction that is coming into our homelands, like it did at Standing Rock, and right now at Thacker Pass. I mean, we're constantly dealing with these threats. So we pass it on to our children, even whether we like it or not, because of who we are.
I agree. And I really like your point about what these movements are. So when we're thinking about and tying things together with the Black Power movement, there are a lot of similarities, but also the American Indian movement was never about inclusion into the American system. So while the civil rights movement is fighting for this inclusion, right, AIM and the Red Power movement broadly is fighting for autonomy. It's fighting for the right to take care of its people, right? So while they have some similar goals, they also have some vastly different goals. And our work has to be intergenerational, right? Because the attacks continue. And what we can do is apply what we've learned over the years, what our parents, grandparents, our kin have learned to these kind of new issues that come up regularly. So the work has to be intergenerational. And I think let's move on. Let's give us some time at the end to have even more conversation. So let's move to our last clips for today. So this is the last group of clips focusing on the medium of the podcast and telling Leonard's story.
This call is from a federal prison.
Yeah, the aneurysm could be fixed in a 3-hour operation, And this prostrate problem, I had a specialist come in, and he's telling me they got a new ultra lift, they call it, and that's only a 10-minute operation. But if it keeps going the way it's going and it's not treated, then it's going to develop into something more serious, The lungs, I don't know what the hell that is. I really don't know. They won't tell me what the hell it is,
You can't get the procedures. What do the doctors say? You can't get the.
Well, they won't. Basically, in prison, they won't treat you until it's life and death matter. Then it's usually too late,
Right, and it doesn't sound like that. Sounds like that would be more expensive. I mean, once it's life or death, just logically, that's going to be a more expensive procedure than, like you just said, doing a 10-minute deal.
Yeah. Well, I agree, but that's just not reality for a prisoner. They're going to shut me off, bro. But listen, also watch out for the email, so we can email, because I only get so many minutes a month.
And I believe we have one more clip coming.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if this is such a good morning, but I don't know how to open this letter to everyone.
This is the celebrated actor and writer, Peter Coyote, reading an email from Leonard Peltier, sent on January 20th, 2021 at 9:50 a.m., the morning after President Trump's final day in office. Over the course of his tenure, Trump issued 143 pardons, 1 in 2017, 6 in 2018, 8 in 2019, 12 in 2020, and 116 in January 2021. But he showed no mercy to Leonard.
Yes, I heard the loser did not sign my clemency. I had this strong feeling yesterday that I wasn't going to get it. I don't know why I had it. I guess it was the spirits telling me. So I sat down trying to write you all a letter, but my tears of self-pity must have overwhelmed me as I could not see to finish it. So I had to stop for a while and think about my family and friends and people and how it must be for them too. So I pulled myself together and thought to myself, well, I'm not going to give up. It's been a hard 45 years, and it'll get a lot harder. I'm sure as I age and in the moments when hopelessness overtakes me, but at my age all I can do is ask so many of you to stay with me and let's try again.
So as we move into our last section of the webinar, I just want to let folks know that they are free to ask questions. So if you would like to post your questions in the Q&A or in the chat box, we will have time to take questions after this last section. So feel free to go ahead and queue those up for Rory, Andrew, Chase, or myself, and then we will bring them in after this last part. So in this first group of clips we heard today, you all, Andrew and Rory, chose to play one old news broadcast, right? And then in the second, you asked Peter Coyote to read a letter by Leonard. So can you talk about these choices, these kind of creative choices you made in the podcast? Was this pragmatic? Were there other reasons behind choosing when and how to present this information?
Sure. Just to clarify, that first clip was actually Leonard called me. And but we have used other clips. So I get the first clip you played at the beginning from 60 Minutes, obviously, and we've used some other ones. But yes, I mean, obviously, Leonard is, like we said, in a maximum security prison, and access to him is severely restricted. So Chase has been able to get in to see him. We have not been able to get in to see him. One of the rules for federal prisoners that, as far as I understand it, is that if you want to visit Leonard, you needed to have a relationship with him prior to his incarceration, or you need to have some sort of family tie to him. So Andrew and I have not been able to get in there to see him, but we were able to get a phone call from him. He gets, I think, like 300 minutes a month or something. And what's interesting about that also is that we were talking to author Sharon Wyatt Leonard, who just put out a great book, I Will, like last year. But anyways, she had this interesting story that she had actually met Leonard prior to 9/11. So, right, she had gone to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, where Leonard was previously imprisoned, and she was allowed in to see him because of rules regarding prison powwows. So she had actually gotten in to see him through this prison powwow thing, and she was only allowed into the prison powwow thing because she wasn't on his regular visitor list. And so then after that, she was able to get on his visitor list, and she used to say he could call her all the time. Then September 11th happened, and all of a sudden there's a new rule where you get 300 minutes. So Leonard has 300 minutes to talk to his lawyer, to talk to his family, to talk to his friends. So that's not very much time. And literally, I think you get 10 minutes when he calls you. And there's a little, you heard the little beeping. There's a little beeping sound that comes in. That's when it's running out. And when I spoke to him, it was actually my father-in-law's birthday. I was planning on going down to Orange County. I live in LA. It was like the worst possible time he could have called. And I was like, oh my gosh, this unknown, right, comes in unknown, or, doesn't tell you who it is. I'm like, oh, this is clearly probably Leonard. And then I was panicking, trying to get my recording set up. And it was like, I was a mess. But
I think you had just
to...
gotten out of the shower, hadn't you?
Yeah.
You were literally just out of the shower.
I was trying to spare people that mental image. But yes,
Yeah.
I had been in the shower. And anyways, I was just so happy to talk to him. And at the time, I thought I would talk to him a lot more. Unfortunately, like I said, it's very hard to speak to him. It's easier to email him. So then we started emailing a lot. And that's the second clip was Peter Coyote reading out an email that he sent to us, as well as to some of his other supporters, when he was really gutted about he thought he had a chance with Trump to get a clemency, but obviously didn't happen. And so Peter Coyote was a big, get for us, because he used to be an MC for various Leonard benefits. And he's obviously, an Emmy Award winner and just world renowned. So to have his voice, we thought that would be a draw. And it was also practical, lets us keep Leonard's voice in the story. And there's some other things we've done. I'll let Andrew tell you about that.
Yeah, just to piggyback there on what Rory was saying, I mean, we've tried to incorporate a lot of different elements into the creative process of the podcast. Like Rory said, Peter Coyote has been incredible to work with. We have also done some recreations of transcripts that we were actually gifted by the late director Michael Apted, who, if you guys don't know his work, he's an incredible director, British guy. He's well known for doing all kinds of projects. One was Gorillas in the Mist, which is a favorite film of mine, actually. But Michael did the 1991 documentary called Incident at Oglala, which was produced by Robert Redford. Interestingly enough, at the same time, he was actually writing, shooting, and directing a movie called Thunderheart on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, which was a similar story to Leonard's, kind of adapted. So if you can imagine this is what's so incredible. He was shooting a documentary while shooting a feature film at the exact same time on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And he was an incredible investigator. And he, before he passed away, we met him. He was the most generous, lovely guy you could ever imagine. And he, after we interviewed him, he was like, "Oh, I've got all these transcripts in my garage out here. You guys want them?" And we were just like, it was like uncovering treasure, So we've been recreating those transcripts, and some are with Peter Coyote as Leonard. We've cast actors and things like that. So we're really excited about how those have turned out to try and one of our main goals was to bring this to a new generation, because when Rory and I started this project, we had never heard Leonard's story before. And we were like, how do we not know this? And so we're hoping that with the podcast and getting people like Peter Coyote to voice Leonard's thoughts and feelings at the time, and having people like Michael Apted, that people will understand what was going on at that time in Pine Ridge.
And in doing so, hopefully also understand what continues to happen both on and off reservations for American Indians.
Absolutely.
And just to give a quick shout out to Thunderheart, I'm just going to say one of Graham Greene's best performances, especially a very specific scene. I'm not going to spoil it for a younger audience. Specific scenes that I very much appreciate. So as we wrap up these last few minutes, could you talk a little bit about why a podcast? So why the format of the podcast? What is it about this format that kind of contributes to the audio storytelling that other formats may not? And also, if you could talk just a bit about, and this kind of just goes back to your other point. So we know that his phone calls were very limited. Was other contact with him very limited? For example, were the emails limited, or was this something where you kind of had unfettered email access?
Sure, I can jump on the email one before I forget it. The email is normally pretty reliable, although one of the issues with communicating with Leonard is that all of a sudden you won't hear from him and you don't know why. And a lot of times it's because the prison has been put on lockdown due to some sort of incidents in the prison, or, you really don't know. You don't know why there's been a lockdown, but he can't access his computer. He can't access his phone usually. So it's very worrying. because your mind goes to all the worst places. You're thinking, oh my gosh, is he is he lying in a hospital bed? Is he near the end, or you don't know what's happening. So that is, that's the deal with the emails. It's pretty good when he's, not on lockdown, but unfortunately you won't be able to hear from him sometimes, and then your mind just wanders. But as for podcasting, Andrew and I started out as documentary filmmakers. We still are documentary filmmakers, but obviously documentaries, you have audio and you have visuals, and it gets expensive pretty quickly, especially color correction. And there's a lot of things going on. So the budget really can get higher than you want it to be really fast. And one of the neat things about podcasting is you only have to worry about obviously half of that equation. You don't have to worry about the audio. So it's much more, feasible to do an independent production. Andrew and I have just been funding this, through friends and family essentially, and not making any money off of it. It's available for free. But we want to do a documentary, and we are doing a documentary with Chase. We're adapting it, and the podcast allows us to develop an audience for Leonard's story to, so our audience is on this journey with us. They know there's a documentary that's going to come out. So that's just a way of showing to, we're trying to bring in partners, and they always want to say, hey, what's your audience? How many downloads do you have? How many people are following you? This and that. So that's one of the advantages to doing it this way is we're building up an audience, and we're becoming more knowledgeable on the subject, and making connections with interviews like Chase and other people. I got a shout out to the Bear Runners, Edgar Bear Runner, who's passed away, but his father Oscar was a big deal at Wounded Knee, and Edgar was kind of the de facto mediator on June 26th, and due to his actions, Leonard and Gene Roach and a lot of other people were able to escape. They might have all been killed that day because there was a raid and they shot up all the buildings, and so just shout out to Edgar Bear Runner. I wanted to get that in because he passed away, but he was the first person to invite us out to Pine Ridge, and he really took us around and introduced us to so many great people. But I'll let Andrew also pick up on the podcasting medium.
Yeah, I mean, like Rory said, we come from the documentary film background, and came across this story that, like I said earlier, we didn't know, and it felt very. There was a kind of need to get this out there. So if we had waited around and made a documentary, we could maybe just be getting this out there now. Whereas with the podcast sort of medium, you can go week or couple weeks to week, really starting to build that audience and getting Leonard's story out there, because like we were saying earlier, I mean, he is an elder and he is in prison and his time is limited. So it was kind of just seemed like the perfect avenue for us. Yeah, that's I think pretty much the reason. And we found it's worked great. I mean, he's not out of prison yet, obviously, but I think bringing that awareness to a younger generation through a newer medium, that younger people are listening to, has hopefully spread the word.
And this actually transitions a little bit into one of the questions we've had in the chat, which is, do you have an estimated date that we will all be able to watch this documentary and share it in our classrooms as well?
I wish we had a date. I'd just be pulling it out of the sky. But yes, hang in there with us. We are making progress. We just actually found some incredible clips at Vanderbilt's television news archives, which is in Nashville. Andrew went over there and scoped it out. But we found some incredible footage. Actually, there's an interview with Wallace Little, June Little's Chase's grandpa. We found an old interview from like July 1975. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Just piggybacking on that. I mean, for all you documentarians out there, I think, and documentary lovers, if you look at the story behind the stories of the best documentaries out there, they usually take so long, right? Like to film these things. And that's what makes them so great, is because they are documents over a lot of times 5 to 20 years of something or someone. And that's why they end up being so incredible. But with the podcast medium, you can kind of just strip away some of those notions and really focus in on things and get stuff done a lot easier and cheaper, like Rory was saying, and tell a story in less time. I think we like telling people, like, of all the documentaries hours we've made like 3 or 4 times that in just audio documentary with the podcast. But so it's kind of an interesting play. We obviously still love making films, but it's been a fun medium to explore, and we really enjoy it.
Well, we're looking forward to it. So moving on to some of the questions we have in the Q&A. We do have a question about Leonard's artwork, and you said at the beginning that his paints had been returned to him, so he is able to start painting again, if I recall correctly.
Yes, that's right. He recently got his paints back. They were taken away because of COVID restrictions. I'm not sure why, but yes, he was not able to paint for a long stretch there. So that gives him obviously a creative outlet, and we're glad that he can express that. But yes, actually, there's a book that City Arts put out, which is a collection of a lot of Leonard's works. So if people are interested, I would suggest Googling City Arts. It's a nonprofit in New York City, and Leonard Peltier and CP Ben Haim is the director there, and her husband is actually a really talented artist as well. But she put together this book, and I think she released it herself last year. It's great. It's got all of his most famous works.
That is great to know, and maybe we can get a link put in the chat for our audience as well. We do have a question. Oh, the link's in the chat already. All right. We do have a question for Chase. One of our audience members wants to know if you could talk a bit more about Leonard's transfer from different prisons. The question isn't specific, so he has not been in the same prison over his stay in prison, but also this may be a question about his chance of transferring out.
Well, we've been, you know what, shout out to, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but Sippy Benheim. I know that she's a great supporter and organizer. She hosted Kevin Sharp in New York at an art gallery, such an amazing, and Kimberly LaFramboise is also in the chat. She has direct contact with Leonard. She might be able to, even if people want to buy Leonard's artwork directly. Paulette Detay Robidoux is the widow of Bob Robidoux, one of Leonard's co-defendants. Bob Robidoux and Dino Butler were acquitted on self-defense because they were able to bring in a lot more evidence. Paulette Detay Robidoux is in the chat and corrected me, and because Leonard is the longest Native political prisoner. There are others that are not Native American that are being held as political prisoners. So I appreciate that. I've known of Leonard's the effort to transfer Leonard since Paulette got me involved and was able to get me in to see Leonard. And so it's been 3 years in the making that we've been trying to get him transferred, but it's not there yet. I'm not quite sure what the holdup is, but we're trying to get him back to Wisconsin. Leonard is very much interested in going anywhere closer from the Turtle Mountain Reservation, which is North Dakota and Canada border, to the Black Hills, which would also include Inglewood down there in Colorado. But we got to keep working on it. There's some things that are unannounced. I just want to say that when you listen to the work that Rory and Andrew do, it is a podcast. It is an auditory experience. And for anybody who commutes anybody who hikes or runs or walks or just spends time with their headphones in their ears, it's amazing. It's not like you're sitting in a studio. At least I didn't sit in the studio. Brother Rory and Andrew sat in the studio and cut this thing up and made it just sound amazing. Because when you listen to it, they're there, right there. When we're talking to Edgar Bear Runner, or when we're talking to myself or Dave Swallow or Dan Marivaux. I mean, there's so much more to explore in this. I don't know how the documentary, what that is going to turn out to be. I'm definitely interested in drama, in fictional portrayals of actual events, docudramas, whatever. But we're in the process of organizing that and trying to connect to the right people who might be interested in helping us. So that will take form. I mean, all of us have a fire in our bellies because we do not want Leonard to transition while he's inside the iron bars. That we cannot live with that. We cannot accept that. So I just want to say about that much.
And we have a question that speaks a little bit to the format here from an anonymous attendee. So they ask, what are some of the creative ways you all are hoping to tell the story as a movie that you can't do in this podcast format? So Chase, you mentioned kind of a docudrama. Are there other ways you're thinking that a movie format can help fill out this story?
I'm going to defer to Rory
definitely.
and Andrew.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. You know, I think like Chase was saying, there's really no feeling I've ever experienced before as you feel as you're on a native land on an Indian reservation. Coming from a background that has never been there before, right? So we want to capture what it's like to feel the feelings of being with the first people that were on the soil that we all live on, right? So that's kind of part of it. Like Chase was saying, reenactments, we really want to do some, but I think overall just trying to capture visually the traditions and the culture. That's something that most Americans unfortunately have never gotten the opportunity to see. I mean, I don't mean to speak for Rory, but I think we've met some of the most incredible people of our lives throughout this project, and certainly some of the most wonderful people I've ever met, that I know will be our friends for the rest of our lives.
And
So
I would
capturing that spirit.
Yeah. And just to build on that, obviously, we said the podcast is you're leaving off all the visuals. So, I mean, Pine Ridge is beautiful. Where the little ranch is, I mean, it's just picturesque. There's this craggy hill line. Chase goes running out there. I would love to ride a mountain bike out there. I mean, it's just beautiful country, Badlands. I mean, you get the Black Hills. It's just all stunning. So we do our best in the podcast to give you a little taste of the visuals, but obviously we're limited there. And then the other great thing about a documentary, is not everyone's going to listen to. We've got 18 episodes now, and our 19th one is pretty much done. That's the Butler Robidoux trial. Thanks for Chase for getting in the Butler Robidoux trial, because that's a big deal. But not everyone's gonna want to listen to. We'll probably have 30 episodes by the time we're through everything. But the documentary will obviously be, we'll probably have a short and a long. So just cover all of our bases. We can get a short one done quicker, and obviously, like we said, time is of the essence because of Leonard's condition.
And not to get too crazy into it, but I mean, I think the beauty of the film medium is to see faces of people, and when you see people's faces and you hear them speak about their experiences, you see moments of history within their face, And so the people, just the people. I mean, we just want to show this incredibly special group of people that have been, really have dealt with a lot of hardship.
Let me add in one thing here, guys, and that is there's been an explosion of Indigenous representation and Indigenous agency. Native people are telling stories that have not been told before. They're being allowed in places that they have not been able to get into before. And Leonard Peltier is one of them stories that is deliberately covered up because of what it deals with. But Leonard Peltier is just like Sitting Bull, just like Crazy Horse. When those guys were killed, you did not want to claim that you were related to those guys because the political culture just wasn't conducive to your upward mobility. Well, Leonard went through that. He's doing our time right now. Without Leonard Peltier, without what happened here in the 70s, there is no Indigenous sovereignty, Indigenous nationhood, Indigenous representation or agency. And we're very encouraged and proud of the fact that Natives are on all the highest levels now. That is a great thing. You can go onto your smart TV, you can watch Reservation Dogs, you can watch Prey, you can watch Rutherford Falls. Like there's an explosion. Even when we talked about Thunderheart, I got a good friend who was writing for Thunderheart. I did not know, Andrew, that was the other side of Thunderheart that I had heard, because John Fusco, Native writers circles are popping up. They're being plugged into all these industries, but Leonard Peltier is being left in the 70s, and we're doing our level best. Just like Rory said, we would be pulling a number out of the sky if we said, yes, in 2-3 years, we're going to have a documentary. But what is encouraging is that we've been when we're on the ground, we're also capturing footage. And so we're delivering to you an auditory experience, but we have a bank of footage that we're working to get out there.
One line that always sticks with me from some of the stuff that we've shot, especially with you, Chase, is you talk about how future or previous generations had weapons, guns, this, that, but nowadays our weapon is the camera.
That's right, man.
And that was like, I remember when you said that line, and we've listened to it maybe 20,000 times since then. But that line in itself is just so powerful, I think, because it's peaceful, right? But it turns the focus on, you can't just get away with things anymore. Hopefully,
it does what true art does. It instigates a conflict. Sometimes it's a conflict within ourselves. Sometimes it's a conflict because there is oppression happening. It's palpable. There's Leonard's in jail right now. Conditions on reservations are horrible. There's a reason. There's a very diabolical reason that is existing right now, and we're trying to unpack that and deconstruct that from the inside. Even Professor Courtney Lewis is deconstructing that from inside these institutions. Like that's how it happens. Like that's how Indigenous nations survive. So we're all doing important things here.
And speaking of important work, our final question, and this is one that we usually get quite a bit, is how can I help? And I'd like to just thank both Paulette and Kimberly for putting some resources in the chat right now, specifically for Leonard. So I would direct our audience to take a look at some of those. But from you all, as we wrap up, how can people help?
You can definitely contact your representatives. That is definitely something to do. So contact your representatives and tell them that you would like clemency for Leonard Peltier. You don't have to go into, crazy amount of detail. I know Amnesty International. I'm so happy that Kim and Paulette have been posting everything in the chat there. Thank you. But
and
yes,
Gavrilla as well.
Yes, Gavrilla, Amnesty International has a petition that you can sign. I think if you go to Amnesty San Francisco, that's Gavrilla's group, and it's available on their Twitter page. There's a hotline to call Joe Biden, and you can leave a message. You can do that There's like, I think 4 hours, 11 to 3, or some hours that you can do that. And I believe there's actually a number now where that you can text Joe Biden, not Joe, not his direct number, but there's some texting option now. So text away. But we're also on social media, Leonard_pod on Twitter and Instagram. Chase, you should follow Chase, Chase Iron Eyes. He's on all the platforms. Jen Bendry at the Huffington Post is a journalist who covers Leonard a lot. You can follow Jen. She's usually got the latest stuff as well. Andrew, what am I forgetting?
Look into Kevin McKiernan's work. He is one of our supervising producers and has been on the ground since Wounded Knee as a rookie reporter. Kevin's one of the most incredible guys out there. Yeah, just keep Leonard in your thoughts and make those calls, make those texts, and keep the juju going.
Mm-hmm. I second all of that, and just keep your intentions strong for Leonard. He's very much keeping his hope and his intentions alive inside of the metal bars. Go to all the websites if you know anybody who might have a line in, or who might be able to get a yes or a no. That's really all we're asking for. Every single presidency, we're just asking for a yes or a no. But I want to thank you all for tuning in and paying attention.
And I'd like to thank you all for bringing all of this to our audience's attention, and hopefully an even broader audience as this moves slowly into a visual format. So thank you again to Chase, to Rory, and Andrew. And for our audience, check the chat for more resources on how you can help Leonard Peltier. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.